My name is Bhumika, and we have Rosemary, Lara, Prateek, and Trevor. So without further ado, we're going to get started with the questions. And what we did for the questions is we crowdsourced them, and you can see them in these cute little boxes. So we're going to take turns to read the questions and just talk to you about our book and also about the writing process. So there might be a lot of you here who are interested in writing or who want to build a career in writing. So you're in the right session. Welcome again. We're going to get started. Okay, I will lead. Why did you want to put together a collection of stories set in Bangalore? I'm curious about the arrangement of the stories in the anthology. What were the choices you made as an editor? Like I was telling you in the introduction, the reason we decided to have an anthology centered around stories in Bangalore was quite self-evident. We are a Bangalore-based organization. Our publisher is a Bangalore-based organization, and we really wanted to keep it all Bangalore. And the reason Bangalore is such a special city is because it allowed for things like a writing school to happen. It allowed things like independent publishing to reach the state that it has. So these were some of the key reasons that we decided we have to celebrate Bangalore. Another thing that most of you, I'm sure, can relate is that Bangalore is a place where we have people with very diverse opinions coexisting fairly peacefully when you compare to the way things happen in other places across India itself. So that was one of the reasons we decided to do a Bangalore-based anthology. The arrangement of the stories is, it was fairly intuitive, I must say, but I think some of the things that I wanted to focus on was that we needed a story for every kind of reader. Because, you know, when I work with my writers, I meet writers with very diverse experiences, life experiences, with very diverse thoughts. And I wanted to feature them and introduce new writers to the literary canon. That's one thing. And the other thing is that as for readers as well, I wanted every kind of reader to enjoy a story. So you could buy this book, which I urge you all to do at the pop-up bookstore of Hattakalata there. When you buy this book and read through the stories, you can find that there is a story maybe for your grandfather who's lived in Bangalore for all his life. And there is a story for your child. There is a story for you, and which talks about your experiences. And we traverse a whole lot of themes through the book as well. We talk about nostalgia, definitely. We also talk about globalization. We talk about climate change and how that's affecting us. So there are a lot of things that we talk about in this anthology, which is why I think the arrangement is the way it is. I would really like it if you read through the book and then, reach out to me on social media or somewhere and tell me if you thought my arrangement worked or not. I'd be very happy to hear what you think about it. So we'll move on to the next speaker then. Rose?
Thank you. So my first question, Adulting in Bangalore, that's my story, page 57, I memorized the page number, is a very moving, emotional story of heartbreak and unrequited love. But it's also a story of confidence and composure. Adulting is a term that gets thrown about from memes to frustrated texts we send each other every day. How much of Teresa's growth is influenced by a city like Bangalore? Why was it important for the city to be set, for the story to be set in 2005? So the first question, Teresa is a character in the story. So, and the name of the story is Adulting in Bangalore. So to me, adulting is basically making choices and then handling the consequences of those choices. So a city like Bangalore, I feel, gives two things. One is anonymity, okay, especially for some of us who come from smaller towns. There is, you're free to do whatever you want. There's nobody going about you. So that's a very heady feeling, and you can do whatever you want. But the second thing is you have to take responsibility for those, whatever you've done with that anonymity. And I think Teresa, in the book, is stretching her decision-making legs. She's quit her job once, she's facing her fears, she's asking Joe, who's the other character. So as she does that, her decision-making legs become stronger, and she gets better at it. So definitely a city like Bangalore almost forces you to grow as a person, as an adult. The second part was, why was it important for the story to be set in 2005? Primarily because I wanted to set the story in a simpler time. Okay, there's no Uber, you still have to quarrel with the auto guy. There's no social media, there's no single tick, double tick, blue tick, okay? You send an SMS and then you wait, okay? And then you don't know what's happening. You can't check if the person is on social media somewhere else and ignoring your message. So it's a simpler time, but I think also it was a time where we had a little more mystery in our lives. And I think that's a good thing when you don't know everything, because that mystery also brings with it that exquisite pleasure of anticipation, yes? And when that reply comes from him, when that SMS reply comes, that is a different kind of joy. So, thank you.
Hi. So my question is, Nothing is Required, which is the story, has a quiet violence stemming from a nuanced understanding of cultural backgrounds. The conflict is so understated, it's done enviably well. Thank you. How did you create the characters that are the source of conflict in your story, but yet are impossible to hate? How did you write about a lifestyle and culture that is not your own? Was observation the main research mode used? Okay, so yeah, I think I'm very fascinated with the ways that love is defined and interpreted and given and received differently across cultures. And I think even all the little unwritten rules about it that you don't realize until you sort of stumble upon it, upon a different version, right, or a different interpretation. And I wanted to ask the question, I think, of, can love exist within the context of so much obligation? And I also wanted to ask the opposite question, which is, does love ever exist without that, in this kind of state of complete freedom? And I think the two characters who are in conflict, the mother-in-law and the narrator, they each sort of embody one view of love, right? And there's no malice towards the other, no intent. It's only that the source of the conflict feels like it's just because they define love very differently. And I wanted to use those characters to depict kind of the warring of those two questions. So that was the source. And then the question of, how do you write about a lifestyle and culture that is not your own? So for me, I think, the basics of writing is that you try to enter a character's head. And that in itself is entering a different country, right? That's the basic foundation of, I think, being a writer. So, so that doesn't feel like a big stretch, to try to understand another culture. And then the last question, was observation the main research mode used? I feel like this is a very sneaky, tricksy question to try to get me to tell you whether this is based on real life or not, which I'm not going to. And, and I think, I was just thinking about, I heard that John Updike, every time he publishes a novel, he loses sort of minimum of 6 friends, because he doesn't, he doesn't veil the characters at all. But I'm not going to answer that question further in any way.
Hi. All right, so my question is, A Place of Our Own is a very interesting story. We talk about the difficulty couples face trying to find a place to stay in, especially if they are not married. I love how this was explored in the story, but the story is so much more than that. The rising communal tensions in the country form a very pale backdrop. Do you think the benevolence of Mrs. Banerjee is the benevolence of Bangalore as well? Would you say Bangalore is a benevolent city? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Bangalore is so open and so accepting, and that's precisely the reason so many people, from all different parts of the country move to Bangalore. And Bangalore not only provides them with the means and opportunities to be financially independent, but it also gives them a sense of personhood, which they may be lacking or which may not be developed back in their hometowns, because we come from different places. Our families have different expectations. They want us to go to IITs and IIMs and whatnot, right? So I realized that it's only after coming to Bangalore that I started to think of myself as a person, and I could also do these other things. I could be a writer, or somebody could be, a chef. So I think Bangalore gives this sense of, self to a lot of people. And like Rosemary said, right, there is anonymity to be found in a place as crowded as Bangalore. So there is that, and there is benevolence in that. In the story, Irshad, who's the protagonist, he says that Bangalore is kind of the Goldilocks zone, which is at the right distance from their hometowns, where a relationship between Irshad and Niharika could happen. And Bangalore is their safe haven. Their friends, their colleagues, everybody is accepting of who they are. This is where they could be together. And yeah, definitely, the benevolence of Bangalore is reflected through everybody that they encounter in their life. So, I mean, without a doubt, Bangalore is a really benevolent city. It's my home now, so yeah. Thank you.
Hey. My question is, Tsunami, which is the name of my story. Tsunami talks about the dangers of development and climate change in a subtle way, but the message is very clear and foreboding. This story captures so well the feeling of loss that many Bangaloreans carry with them as perhaps their primary relationship with their city. Arguably, it is a thread woven through much of this anthology. Having never set foot here previously, how did you hone in such a pitch-perfect manner on the city's theme song? Yeah, because I wrote this story before I came to Bangalore. This is actually my first time here. And I think it's a surreal feeling that when I read the anthology, realizing how many of the stories had a nostalgic feeling to them. And I can't really, I mean, I think for me, the stories of loss have always been stories that I want to tell. I also think probably at the time I was just thinking about cities, and I don't even know if like that sense of loss is only a Bangalore thing. I think like a city is just a machine of continual loss because it alters so quickly. And like I'd lived in London for 8 years, and most of the buildings I lived in are demolished now. Like they don't even exist anymore. And because I was moving around a lot as well. I don't know. I think I just almost got lucky, I guess, that I had this sense of that feeling of loss in Bangalore. I don't know. That's it.
Okay. So now we'll move on to. Can you hear me?
You need to turn it on.
No. Okay. So now we're going to move on to questions related to craft, which I'm sure is very useful to the audience here. So listen carefully. We'll start with you, Trevor.
Research is so important to writing a good story. We know this as writers, but I was gobsmacked when I learned this is Trevor's first visit to India, much less Bangalore. I really want to know, Trevor, how did you do the research? What was the inspiration? What were the things that you had to keep in mind? Actually, I think the inspiration was just that I wanted to impress Bhumika, and I wanted to surprise her or something. And so I guess I had the sense that Bhumika liked going out. So I just had this idea like it had to be in a bar. That was the first thought. And then when I started just reading up about bars in the city, I think I found an article about how there had been this battle between the beer producers and the arak producers, and I was a bit tied up in politics and property development, and there was a bit of an intrigue there. So I think initially the story was going in that direction. I was actually in the north of Australia at the time, in Arnhem Land, which had a monsoon, was on the way there. And so I remember, I had this feeling of like storms. I had a very distinct image there of like two people kissing on a beach, and I just knew I had to have that in the story. So out of that, the story was built. And so because I had two people who needed to kiss on a beach, I needed to find a reason for a character to be there. And then there was just something about like two people kissing in the rain on a beach with waves. Maybe it's a very Bollywood image as well, I don't know. And then because of the waves, I guess the idea of like the tsunami came and the research. I think I just wanted characters in a bar for Bhumika, and then like two people kissing on a beach in the rain, and then the rest, it just kind of assembled itself after that. It wrote itself, yeah.
Okay. All right, my question. Yeah. Okay, my question is, the art of subtle and poignant reveal is so evident throughout your story. As a reader, I feel so respected by the nuance, by your refusal to tell, and only to show, by the ambiguity of the ending. I love the imagery and the symbolism of birds in the story, for instance. How has your craft as a writer developed to provide this sense of freedom and space to the reader? Oh my God, I've loved this question because you have picked up on so many little things that I tried to put in there. I think the short answer of that is that you have to write and rewrite and edit until you're done. And there is this discipline and relentlessness that is required, a little bit of stubbornness to not give up. I remember when I walked into the workshop, I was very arrogant, and I thought there were two kinds of stories. One where everybody, lives happily ever after, and the second one where everybody dies. And it's only because of Bhumika and all my, talented fellow writers that I realized that there is a very rich possibility of somewhere in the middle where there is also a possibility for the reader to insert themselves into the story and make the story their own, interpret it the way they want to. So I think that is one of the lessons that has really stayed with me. And you need good teachers, you need a writing community. You can think of all these things as equations and try to work them into your story, but it doesn't quite work that way. So I think you have to surround yourself with writers who respect you, writers who you respect, and who are fearless in giving you feedback, and who can tell you that your mom has been lying to you, you are not the best writer in the world. And I think that's how you go about it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Okay, so my question is, how did you know the story was finished on that last sentence? I couldn't believe it ended there, but once it did, it made perfect sense. How did you know that was it? I can imagine my mother reading it and having a very different takeaway. How did you write an ending that can be interpreted differently by different people? One of the things I really learned at the BWW Writers Workshop was how, particularly in short stories and also poetry, because of the length of the genres, that the ending is really key. And that what you're trying to, in some ways, you're trying to aim for at the ending is something that turns perspective, or turns everything around at the very end, and maybe makes you feel differently about everything that you've read before. So when I would read short stories that did that really well, I would just kind of envy them for long periods of time, and I don't think that part is very easy for me at all. But the whole perspective of the story up till the ending in Nothing Is Required is from the narrator's perspective, and so you're kind of feeling her responses the entire time, and her dissatisfaction, inability to sort of allow love in with all the expectations it comes with. And And at the end, we get the mother-in-law's comment, and the comment really holds a retelling, right? It's the mother-in-law's telling, where you also see that the daughter-in-law's or the narrator's type of love that she has been offering has also been unpalatable for the mother-in-law. And you see that it's also probably been quite harmful. And I think it causes you to kind of relook at what's actually going on and maybe even question what's right or what's wrong in the story, right? And so I've had a lot of different responses, very different responses to the piece, and very different culturally as well. So sometimes I'll send it to some Western friends and they'll have a very sympathetic bend towards the narrator. Oh God, how does she put up with it? All these things. And when I give it to some of my fellow writers or my friends here in India, it's much more nuanced. And there's a lot of sadness in their response, maybe pity towards the narrator and her inability to love. So I'm really quite pleased with that very different response. I think it maybe hits on something that's very deep in us, hopefully, about how we define love.
Okay, so my question is, we often talk about killing our darlings in writing. Were there darlings you had to kill for this story? So I think all those who are interested in writing will know what that means. Basically, you should be ready to edit out or change things that you think were just amazing. Like, did I write this? It's so good. But are you ready to change that? And actually, I did have to kill some darlings in this. Bhumika recommended to change some things, and it was very tough. And I might have sent some unpleasant thoughts towards her, but it was actually, in the grand scheme of the story, it wasn't even a big deal, and actually Bhumika simplified it, but it was very hard to let it go and allow it to be changed. But then I asked myself, do I want to be published? And I did. I really did. So that's the first part. But the second, I guess, more important part is that as part of the workshop, the BWW workshop, one of the crucial things we do and learn is how to give and receive feedback. So it's a community where you receive very strong, very incisive, very clear feedback, but you know that it is never about you, and it's always about the writing. So you never feel attacked in the community. So as a writer, I think that's a very crucial skill to learn, to listen to your editor, to listen to your fellow reader, and be willing to change. And that's something that if I've learned it and I'm learning it, I'm indebted to the workshop and Bhumika.
This is the last question of the evening. So, what is your advice to aspiring writers who want to take up writing more seriously? I think this is, quite frankly, a no-brainer. If you like writing, then you absolutely need to read a lot. You need to read all kinds of things you don't like reading, things that don't interest you, things that you love and are passionate about and you could kill people over. You should read everything that you can lay your hands on. That's one thing. Second, you should join the Bangalore Writers Workshop. But jokes aside, it's really important, and I think the testimonial to the fact that we're 10 years old and we're still going strong is the fact that having a community around writing really helps. The notion is that, writers are isolated beings. They work in silos. They have this creative inspiration. They sit in a, really fancy hill station, or they're by the beach and creating stuff all by themselves, and suddenly they get published and it's all great. Bullshit. I've tried it. It doesn't work. All you end up doing is you end up having a great holiday, But when it comes to really writing, you need a community. You need people who can read it for what it is and tell you whether something's working or not, and why and how. And you need to be able to thresh ideas out with people. You also need people to have inspirations from, to have experiences from. Like if the writing community dragged Trevor all the way from Melbourne and come here just for this event today, so that's really a testimony to how communal a writing activity is. So really surround yourself with people who also like to read and write, who also are interested in the things that you are, and that's one of the nicest things that you can do for yourself. If you do join BWW, we are very lovely, so consider that. But do buy the book. We are running a campaign on social media called My BWW Bangalore Story, where we're inviting other people to share their Bangalore stories with us. So, you know, the idea is really to collate a sense of what Bangalore means to different people. Obviously, 30 stories is not enough. You know, we're a large city. Our traffic is testimony to that. So it's a good idea to have a lot of people share what you think about the book, share what you think about the story. All you need to do for that is get a copy of a book, pose with it, and tell us your BWW Bangalore story. That's all you'll have to do. So do keep writing, do keep reading, and this is already great that on a Sunday evening you all are sitting here instead of being at Toit or something like that, right? So well done, all of you. Thank you so much for coming for the event. Thank you for your time. Thank you all.